The words cut through the air like a blade. Go back to India. For a moment, the entire room froze. The audience, journalists, supporters, skeptics, sat stunned, their mouths half open, eyes darting between the stage and one another, searching for confirmation that they had really heard it. Cameras clicked in rapid succession. Lenses zoomed in on faces that betrayed shock, amusement, and disbelief all at once. Karoline Leavitt stood with a smirk that seemed rehearsed, the kind of grin meant to signal triumph, as if she had landed the knockout blow. Her tone carried the confidence of someone who thought cruelty was wit, that mockery was power. It wasn't just an insult aimed at one man, it was a dismissal of millions, a line drenched in the arrogance of us versus them. Kash Patel did not move. His posture remained steady, his gaze locked forward, but something shifted in the air around him. He didn't flinch, didn't fire back immediately, and that silence, that refusal to be rattled, only magnified the weight of the insult. To the crowd, the pause felt eternal. To Patel, it was the gathering of composure, the gathering of dignity. The murmurs began. A low wave of outrage spread across the hall. Someone whispered, "Did she really just say that?" A man in the back shook his head in disbelief. A woman near the front pressed her hand against her chest, her face caught between anger and pain. And online, in that very instant, clips were already being uploaded, captions screaming, "Karoline Leavitt crosses the line." This wasn't just another political jab. This was the kind of line that carried centuries of weight. Words meant to remind immigrants of their place. Words meant to exclude, to shrink identities down to origins rather than achievements. And it landed in front of an America watching closely, divided, restless, waiting for someone to claim the high ground. Patel finally drew a breath, steady, deliberate. His lips parted ever so slightly as if he had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. Not the insult, but the response that was about to turn the stage upside down. The silence grew unbearable, until it was clear. The comeback would not just answer her words, it would shake the entire nation. But no one expected the response that came next. Why did that moment land like a lightning strike? Because in America today, words are never just words. They carry history, power, and consequence. And in a nation built by immigrants, the phrase, "Go back to India," was more than an insult. It was an attack on the very fabric of belonging. America has always wrestled with its identity. On one side, there are those who see this nation as a patchwork of stories, cultures, and sacrifices woven together into a single flag. On the other, there are voices that weaponize division, clinging to the illusion of ownership over who gets to be truly American. When Karoline Leavitt hurled that line across the stage, it wasn't only Kash Patel who felt its sting. Every immigrant who has ever been told to go back felt it too. Every child of sacrifice, every worker who started with nothing, every parent who clung to the American dream recognized the venom behind those 4 words. But here's the deeper truth. Moments like this, where the audience in that room didn't know it yet, but they were about to witness more than a debate retort. They were about to see a moment that would explode across headlines, ignite cultural debates, and reshape how America talked about identity. And just when the tension peaked, Patel didn't just respond. He redefined the battlefield. Feel more than personal bias. They reveal the temperature of the times. We live in an era where politics isn't just policy. It's theater, spectacle, and emotional combat. A single phrase can define a career, ignite a movement, or bury someone in disgrace. Leavitt may have thought she was scoring political points. What she did instead was hand Patel, and everyone who shares his struggle, a platform as wide as the nation itself. Already the clip was ricocheting online. Tweets flooded timelines. Disgusting. Un-American. This is what immigrants face every day. On Instagram, captions under Patel's silent face read, "Strength is refusing to stoop low." In living rooms across the country, immigrant families turned to each other, shaking their heads with bitter recognition. We've heard this before. This is why the moment mattered. Because it forced America to look in the mirror. Was the nation still a place where ancestry defined belonging? Or could dignity, sacrifice, and service speak louder than bigotry? The stakes weren't just political, they were personal. For millions watching, Patel was no longer just a man on a debate stage. He had become a vessel for their own untold stories, their own silenced voices. Leavitt wanted to diminish him. Instead, she amplified him. She made him the stand-in for every person who had ever been told they didn't belong. And that is where the true drama begins. Because when someone carries the weight of millions on their shoulders, their response becomes more than words. It becomes a reckoning. I thought she was scoring political points. What she did instead was hand Patel, and everyone who shares his struggle, a platform as wide as the nation itself. To understand why Karoline Leavitt's words landed with such venom, you have to understand Karoline herself. She is young, ambitious, and relentless, a rising conservative voice who thrives on confrontation. In her world, politics isn't about compromise or nuance. It's about winning the soundbite war. And for her, every stage, every microphone, every opponent is another chance to go viral. Leavitt has built her reputation on being combative, sharp-tongued, and unapologetically brash. In an era where outrage translates into retweets and clicks, she mastered the performance. She talks fast, hits hard, and rarely looks back. Supporters call it boldness, and critics call it arrogance. Either way, it has become her signature style. But here's the contradiction at the heart of her persona. She is young enough to frame herself as fresh blood, yet old enough in political tactics to recycle the ugliest playbook in American history: nativism, exclusion, division. For every speech where she calls herself a voice of the next generation, there is a jab, a sneer, a cutting line that reveals the same tired message. Some people belong, others don't. Her youthful bravado masks a reckless arrogance, one that treats politics not as a responsibility, but as a performance designed to humiliate opponents. Observers have noticed this pattern. In debate after debate, Leavitt leans into provocation. When cornered on policy details, she deflects with personal attacks. When challenged on contradictions, she raises her voice and doubles down. It's less about persuasion and more about dominance. She understands that in modern political theater, perception often matters more than facts, and she wields that understanding like a weapon. And yet, the very style that fuels her rise also fuels resentment. For every cheer she earns from a loyal base, there's a growing audience that sees her as the embodiment of everything wrong with today's politics. Too loud, too shallow, too willing to trade dignity for spectacle. It's the kind of arrogance that leaves little room for humility, the kind of confidence that mistakes cruelty for strength. That's what made her "Go Back to India" line so revealing. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was a calculated attempt to demean, to belittle, to strip away the legitimacy of her opponent by reducing him to his ancestry. In her mind, it was a winning move, a soundbite designed to dominate headlines, to paint Patel as an outsider unworthy of the stage. She had used similar tactics before, targeting opponents with barbs about their backgrounds, their loyalties, their identities. But this time, the target wasn't just Patel. The target was the idea of America itself. Behind her smirk that night was the same confidence she carried into every clash. She believed her words would land, that the audience would laugh, that Patel would stumble. It was the belief of someone who had never been forced to face consequences for crossing lines. It was the entitlement of a politician who thought every cruel jab would earn her another headline. But arrogance has a way of blinding its host. Leavitt saw Patel as just another opponent to bulldoze with verbal force. She underestimated his composure, his resilience, and his ability to transform insult into ammunition. She thought this moment would define him in weakness. Instead, it would define her in infamy. What she didn't anticipate was that Patel wasn't just carrying his own story onto that stage. He was carrying the weight of millions who had endured the same words, the same exclusion, the same attempt to erase their belonging. By targeting him, she accidentally provoked all of them. And that is why her smirk, her smug confidence, her carefully crafted insult would soon backfire. Because arrogance, no matter how sharp, always meets its limit when it collides with truth delivered with dignity. She thought she had cornered him, but what she didn't realize was how prepared he was. To understand the weight of Kash Patel's silence that night, you have to understand the journey that shaped him. He was not born into privilege, nor was his path paved by legacy. His story begins with parents who left everything behind, trading the familiarity of home for the uncertainty of America. Like so many immigrant families, they carried only two things across oceans: hope and sacrifice. Patel grew up with the rhythms of resilience etched into his daily life. His parents worked long hours, often in jobs that went unnoticed by the world but kept their family afloat. They did it without complaint because every sacrifice was an investment in their son's future. In a small household marked by discipline and devotion, Patel learned that dignity was not something you inherited, it was something you earned. He carried those lessons with him through school, where he was often underestimated. Teachers, classmates, even peers who couldn't see past his name or his face assumed he would play a supporting role in life's story, not the lead. But Patel learned early that being underestimated could be its own form of power. It forced him to work harder, think sharper, endure longer. While others dismissed him, he quietly built the tools he would need to prove them wrong. His path into public service was never about glory. It was about purpose. Patel understood that America's promise, the idea that anyone, regardless of where they come from, can rise, wasn't just rhetoric. It was his family's lived reality. Every case he worked, every investigation he led, every role he took on inside the machinery of government was fueled by a conviction to protect the nation that had given his parents a chance. But what made Patel remarkable wasn't just his resume. It was his composure. While others in Washington jockeyed for cameras and headlines, Patel learned to hold steady under pressure. He became known for his calm in chaotic rooms, his ability to cut through noise without raising his voice. Allies admired it, opponents dismissed it as passivity. But those who knew him best understood, calm is not weakness. Calm is discipline. Calm is power held in reserve. Through it all, Patel carried the quiet knowledge of what it meant to stand on the margins of belonging. He had been told, directly and indirectly, that he wasn't American enough. He had seen the looks, heard the slights, felt the sting of being treated as an outsider. Yet he never let bitterness define him. Instead, he turned every slight into fuel, every insult into resolve. And so when Leavitt's words cut across the stage, "Go back to India," Patel was not just hearing them for himself. He was hearing them for every child of immigrants who had been told they didn't belong. He was hearing them for his parents, who had worked themselves to the bone so their son could stand on that stage. He was hearing them for every family who still dared to believe in America's promise despite being told they weren't welcome. What the audience saw that night was not a man rattled into silence. They saw a man who had trained for this moment his entire life. His stillness wasn't shock, it was calculation. His pause wasn't weakness, it was preparation. Patel understood that words like Leavitt's thrive on reaction. They are meant to provoke, to drag dignity into the mud of anger, and he refused to give her that satisfaction. Instead, he was about to do something far more powerful, transform the insult into revelation. With a single response, he would not only defend his own place on that stage, he would remind the country of its soul. This is why Patel became the hero of this story. Not because he raised his voice, not because he struck back with venom, but because he carried himself with the kind of dignity America didn't know it was longing for. He embodied the immigrant's journey, the underdog's resilience, the patriot's calm conviction, and in that instant, all those years of struggle converged into one moment of truth. The air was already charged, but after those words, "Go back to India," the atmosphere inside the hall transformed into something heavier, almost unbearable. The cameras kept rolling. The microphones picked up every sharp inhale, every shifting chair, every whispered, "Did she really just say that?" Karoline Leavitt leaned forward, eyes flashing with the kind of confidence that comes from never expecting consequences. She smirked as if she had landed the perfect blow. Her supporters let out small bursts of laughter, not loud but enough to sting. Across the stage, Kash Patel sat still. Not a twitch, not a flinch. His jaw tightened, but he didn't leap into the fire. He let the silence expand. And that silence, in a debate hall designed for noise and clashing voices, became unbearable. The moderator shuffled his papers, unsure whether to intervene. The audience shifted, caught between outrage and curiosity. Some leaned forward, waiting for retaliation. Others looked down, uncomfortable, wishing they hadn't heard what they just heard. Leavitt, sensing the silence as weakness, "That's the problem. People like you come here. You build careers on criticizing America, but deep down you'll never understand what it means to be truly American. The words were sharper now, deliberate, designed to wound. Each syllable was a weapon. Gasps erupted again. This wasn't a casual insult anymore. It was an assault on belonging itself, on the idea that no matter how much someone gave, sacrificed, or achieved, they would still be seen as an outsider. Kash Patel finally moved, slowly. He adjusted the microphone, leaned in just slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. But still he didn't speak. The silence grew louder, louder than her insults, louder than the whispers, louder than the nervous laughter. People began to realize his restraint wasn't weakness. It was control. It was strategy, and that unnerved her. For the first time, the smirk faltered. She shifted in her seat, suddenly aware that the room's energy was slipping from her hands into his. A man in the back row muttered, "Say something, Kash." A woman near the front whispered, "He doesn't need to." Pressed on. The tension was unbearable now. The insult still hung in the air like smoke that refused to clear. The audience wasn't just watching a debate anymore. They were watching a collision of two Americas. One that sought to exclude, another that insisted on belonging. Leavitt tried one last jab, voice raised sharper than before. "If you can't handle the truth, maybe you don't deserve this stage at all." It was a line meant to bury him, to leave him cornered, but Patel still didn't flinch. He blinked once, then twice. His hand rested calmly on the table. His breathing was steady, his expression unreadable. And that's when the realization hit the room. She had overplayed her hand. The more she pushed, the more she revealed her own desperation. He wasn't cornered, she was. The audience knew it. You could see it in their shifting eyes, in their folded arms, in the way the laughter had completely died out. What began as arrogance now looked like recklessness. The insult had echoed through the hall. But Patel's silence was about to become deafening. Cliffhanger line. The insult echoed through the hall, but Patel's silence was about to become deafening. The silence was unbearable. Every second Kash Patel held it stretched like a taut wire across the hall. Then finally he leaned into the microphone. His voice was low, steady, deliberate. "You told me to go back to India." The words echoed back not as a wound but as a mirror. The audience shifted. Everyone knew this was the moment. Patel paused, eyes steady on Leavitt, then let his gaze sweep across the hall. "My parents did come here from India. They came with nothing. They worked brutal hours so that I could sit on this stage today. They didn't ask for handouts. They didn't complain. They believed in the American dream, and tonight, you insulted them." The room went silent. Every ear was tuned to him now. He straightened his shoulders, his tone rising with quiet power. "You see, I don't need to go back anywhere. Because this is my country. I was born here. I serve this nation. I dedicated my life to defending it. And when you tell me, or anyone who looks like me, that we don't belong, you're not insulting me. You're insulting the very idea of America itself." Gasps rippled through the audience. A few heads nodded, others clapped cautiously. The words weren't just a rebuttal. They were a lesson, spoken with surgical precision. Leavitt shifted in her seat, the smirk gone. Her eyes darted, searching for footing that wasn't there. Her shoulders tensed, arms crossed tighter now, body language collapsing under the weight of his calm authority. Patel let the silence breathe again, then leaned forward with his final strike. "And here's the truth. America doesn't belong to one race, or one party, or one person. It belongs to all of us who fight for it, believe in it, and refuse to be silenced. So if you want to tell someone to go back, you might want to take a look in the mirror." The hall erupted. Gasps turned into cheers. Applause thundered. Some stood to their feet, clapping furiously. The energy flipped in an instant. What began as insult had transformed into triumph. Leavitt froze, her jaw tight, face flushed. Every camera captured her stillness against the storm of applause. And beyond the hall, the ripple was already spreading. Phones lit up. Fingers flew across screens. Tweets blasted out. "Patel just destroyed Leavitt on stage. This is the moment of the debate." Clips began shooting across platforms before he had even finished adjusting his mic. He sat back, composed, not soaking in the cheers but letting them wash over naturally. as if he knew this moment wasn't about ego, but about truth. Leavitt's eyes lowered. Her earlier bravado was gone, replaced by a quiet, seething stillness. She knew it. The audience knew it. America watching online knew it. She had tried to bury him with an insult, but he had built a monument on top of it. And as the clapping refused to die down, the camera caught one last look. Patel calm, resolute, unshaken. Leavitt small, cornered, exposed. Cliffhanger line. But this was only the beginning, because outside the room, America was about to erupt. The applause inside that hall hadn't even faded before the outside world ignited. Clips of Patel's response spread like wildfire, cut into 15-second bursts, shared with captions in all caps. He shut her down. Mic drop of the year. By midnight, hashtags surged to the top of trending lists. Patel McDrop, dignity wins, go back goes down. On TikTok, teenagers stitched his words into edits with swelling music. On Instagram, influencers who rarely touched politics posted reels. Patel looking calm and unflinching, Leavitt shrinking beside him. Twitter, or what millions still reflexively called Twitter, was ablaze, every corner of it. Journalists, comedians, activists, even athletes adding their voices. One NBA star tweeted, "Respect. That's how you handle hate. Salute." A Hollywood actress reposted the clip with the caption, "This, right here, America at its best." Meanwhile, cable news producers were scrambling. The segment looped across prime time, commentators dissecting every pause, every shift in body language. On one network, pundits called it the most devastating rebuttal in recent debate memory. Another tried to spin Leavitt's words as taken out of context, but the video, raw, uncut, undeniable, was already too powerful to erase. And then came the memes. Patel standing tall next to captions like, "Say it louder for the people in the back." Leavitt's frozen smirk, plastered with bold text, "When you realize you lost the debate in one sentence." In the digital age, humiliation wasn't just fleeting, it was immortal. What shocked the political class most wasn't just the virality, it was who was sharing it. Immigrant communities lit up with pride. Patel's clip was played in WhatsApp groups from New Jersey to Nairobi, from Silicon Valley to small villages in Gujarat. Parents sent it to their children as proof. Dignity could triumph in the spotlight. Young kids watched a man who looked like them stand tall and unbreakable. For once, representation wasn't a token, it was a thunderclap. Even critics who had dismissed Patel before as a background figure were forced to acknowledge it. In a single moment, he had transformed into a national voice. Commentators admitted it on air. "Whatever you thought of him before," one host said, "tonight Kash Patel became a household name." Leavitt, meanwhile, retreated into damage control. Her team pushed statements insisting her words were mischaracterized, that Patel was grandstanding. But no press release could compete with the clip itself. Every replay reminded viewers of her smirk, her arrogance, and the way it all evaporated under the weight of his calm. The humiliation was complete, not just in political circles but in the broader culture. Late-night hosts wove jokes into monologues. One said, "If debates were boxing matches, the referee would have stopped it after Patel's line." The audience roared. For Patel, the effect was different. His calm, measured response had become more than a comeback. It was a rallying cry. He received thousands of messages. Strangers thanking him, immigrants saying they finally felt seen, veterans saluting his reminder of shared belonging. And as the clip continued to spiral through feeds, it was clear this wasn't just a debate moment. It was a cultural flashpoint. It was a mirror held up to America, forcing the nation to ask who gets to belong, or gets to speak, who gets to claim its promise. Who gets to speak, who gets to claim its promise. The dust was still swirling, the noise deafening, but beneath the roar of applause, hashtags and headlines, one question began to linger, echoing deeper than the rest. Cliffhanger line. And as the dust settled, a question remained. What does this moment say about America itself? In the days that followed, as the noise of headlines began to quiet, what lingered was not the insult. It was the response. Patel's words didn't just silence a rival. They echoed across a nation weary of division, hungry for dignity. They reminded people that strength doesn't always come from shouting the loudest. Sometimes it comes from standing still, steady and unbreakable in the face of hate. This was never just about one debate stage. It was about the story of America itself. A story where millions of families have crossed oceans and borders carrying nothing but hope. A story where sacrifice is measured not by ancestry but by effort, by long hours, by silent prayers, by dreams passed from parent to child. Patel's calm defiance became a symbol for all of them, for every underdog who has been told they don't belong. Because here is the truth. America's greatness has never been about purity. It has always been about plurality, not one identity but many, not one story but a chorus. And when Patel looked his opponent in the eye and reclaimed his belonging, he was speaking not just for himself but for generations who have been told to shrink, to fade, to go back. Dignity over hate. Service over ancestry. These were the values at the heart of his stand. He did not fight arrogance with arrogance nor prejudice with venom. He fought it with a reminder that Americanness is not defined by bloodline but by commitment, by showing up, serving and believing in the promise of equality, even when that promise feels fragile. And for the millions who watched, that message struck deep. Immigrant parents whispered to their children, "See, that's why we came here." Young people who felt invisible saw themselves reflected in a moment of national pride. Even those far removed from Patel's background felt the resonance, because his dignity exposed a truth that transcended politics, that the measure of a person is not where they come from, but how they carry themselves when it matters most. The debate was supposed to be about policies, about platforms, but it became something bigger, a referendum on America's soul. Would we be a nation that weaponizes heritage or one that celebrates resilience, that mocks sacrifice or that honors it, that tries to exclude or that dares to include? Patel didn't answer with charts or slogans. He answered with presence, with composure, with a story that reminded us of what's possible when courage outweighs fear. And that's why his moment was replayed, remembered, and reframed not just as a comeback, but as a cultural touchstone. Because in that silence before his words, every immigrant in America held their breath. And in the thunder that followed, they exhaled, not just relief, but pride. The truth is, every generation has its tests. Some are written in law, others are written in the heat of public exchange. This was one of those tests. And Patel's response became a kind of answer sheet, not perfect, not complete, but powerful enough to remind America what it could still be. And STD, so the moral was clear. Dignity will always outlast hate. Calm will always overpower arrogance. Service will always shine brighter than shallow bravado. The moment was not about tearing down. It was about lifting up, reminding the nation that its true strength comes from those who refuse to be broken. But even as the applause faded and the hashtags began to settle, there was a sense that something larger had been set in motion, because the story was not ending here. If anything, it was just beginning. Cliffhanger line. But as Patel left the stage, everyone knew this wasn't the end of the story. What began as a cruel insult meant to cut him down, go back to India, ended as one of the most unforgettable moments in recent political history. Karoline Leavitt thought she could corner Kash Patel with arrogance and contempt. Instead, his calm defiance turned the stage into a mirror, forcing America to see what truly matters. Not where you come from, but who you are when it counts. And that's why this story struck such a nerve, because it wasn't just Patel's victory. It was the victory of every immigrant family who sacrificed for a chance at the American dream. It was the victory of dignity over hate, of truth over pettiness, of service over shallow arrogance. In the end, Patel didn't just defend himself. He defended an idea of America that too often feels forgotten, the idea that this nation belongs to all who believe in its promise. His words will be remembered not as a clapback, but as a reminder. Hate fades, but dignity echoes. And now the question falls to us. What kind of America do we want to amplify? The one that tries to divide us or the one that dares to unite us? If you believe dignity beats hate, share this story. If you felt pride hearing Patel's words, let others feel it too. And if you want to see more moments where truth cuts through the noise, make sure to subscribe and join us, because this was not the end of the story. It was just the beginning.